Hi, this is David Steinman. Welcome to the Heartland News. First of all, the U.S. Supreme Court in a 9-0 vote just decided to allow the California new districting map to go forward for the 2026 midterm election. Judge Alito signed the denial. That's really good news for all you political junkies and lovers of democracy. And we still have to see what's going to happen in Texas in terms of the voting there, because with the recent huge win for Democrats in that state Senate race, the gerrymandering that the Texas Republican MAGA crowd did may actually backfire. But we'll see. That kind of takes us to the next point. The next point of news: the Washington Post just laid off about a third of its staff. The paper of Woodward and Bernstein is just really being hollowed out. And with it, journalism in its corporate form is being hollowed out. I feel awful for all the journalists, because I am a journalist. I have other family members who are journalists, and this is just we have a very noble, important profession, the only one mentioned in the Constitution, in the First Amendment. And yet, journalism is a very commodity-driven network, and it can be very capital-intensive. And with the demise of print and the advertising centralization online to just a few even larger players than the papers ever were, and the horribleness of Jeff Bezos in kowtowing to Trump, he's just hurting our democracy. I don't respect the man. He's the owner of the Post. I don't respect him. I think Amazon is fabulous. I think the man himself is made of clay feet. What it shows is that what we're doing here in the independent journalism realm, led by networks such as Midas Touch, Brian Taylor Cohn, Keith Edwards, Lev Parnas, this is just a very mixed crowd of journalists, reporters, opinionators, insiders. We're trying to give you news and help you to think about things, because corporate is just repeating the same things over and over again. And now with the Post being hollowed out the way it is, that just really hurts coverage. So we've got to have local coverage, and that's definitely not happening in America. And that's really bad. So independent journalists do need to think of a way. How do we monetize what we love doing and what is so important to the nation, to cities, to states? And that's our job as independent journalists. My area is health and the environment. And it's my job right now to remind everyone, while we're all fighting over reforms to ICE or abolishing ICE, and that's where our focus is, or on the Epstein-Trump files. And I do have a lot to say there in just a moment. But while we're all focused on that, we're forgetting the rest of our economy and people. I am so happy, for example, that Make America Healthy Again is covering pesticides like Roundup, dicamba, because we need to get people interested in their health too, because we're going to need our health to win back our democracy. And then we're going to need our future generations' neurological health, their ability to think, to keep that democracy. We're going to need civics education again. In other words, we're going to need to be more thought. And there are a lot of hidden chemical toxins in our environment. And I usually talk about chemicals, but right now I'm going to talk about social media. That is also a hidden chemical toxin to our kids, because they're not learning to think reflectively. They're just reactionary now. You know, by the time you're 16 or 17, you've got to have read some important books. Even the louts that I grew up with, who I love greatly, read. They just wanted to read. It may have been books on the frontier, it may have been books about the fur trappers or the Appalachian Trail, but they read. We have a generation that doesn't read, which takes us back to the Post. And well, the demise of print is sort of like the demise of the carriage led by horses into the horseless carriage. Cars, no driver cars. We're evolving. That's another hidden chemical toxin, our social media. So if you've got young kids, you've got to get them outside, as they say, touch grass, make them social, physically social. But what we're also missing is all our renewable energy projects. Trump has done an excellent job of turning people against renewables as if there's something bad, when they're so helpful to society. They are helpful economically, and they are so much less polluting. Windmills are so much less polluting. When we talk about the bird issue, where some birds, birds will learn, they're actually learning now over time to avoid certain areas. And that's an easily solvable problem. The thing about the windmills is they don't leave toxic imprints the way that putting up another fuel plant would. If they ever stop working, you take them down, there's not going to be a toxic acreage all around where they were, like you would have with a coal plant. Plus, they don't kill the people living in the nearby communities with toxic fumes, like with benzene and ethylbenzene and ethylene oxide and toluene, all these toxic fumes that my friends in Cancer Alley breathe. So we're missing out on alternatives while we're focusing on, which we have to for the immediate, the situation with ICE. So that takes us to ICE. And I don't want to bury the lead, but it's really important because over the next 2 weeks, this is going to heat up. The question is, are the Democrats going to cave? The funding bills have been passed for almost all the agencies, but not ICE. And what's happening with ICE is, while I don't think Congress can cut the funding with this bill, at least that's what I understand, they can designate reforms to ICE as if they will be followed by the president. So the real question then is, because we know they won't be followed by the president, like body cam, no more violations of the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, trespassing into homes. Do you really think they're going to stop doing that? What about our right? Again, getting back to the First Amendment and journalists, we're all independent journalists now. What about our right to film everyone? If we're just observing, that's journalism. And we're all independent journalists now. That's why we can't make a living. There's so many of us, but this democracy needs it right now. So if you are wielding a smartphone camera at scenes, I love you for it. It's very brave to do. You're being a journalist now, and we need it. We really need it. We do have to focus on reestablishing renewables, wind, solar, geothermal. We have huge potential in the West here to power geothermal without pollution. Trump doesn't like it because he can't take a cut with it, or he hasn't figured out how to yet. I don't know. He's kind of dumb as a box of rocks, as I say. But we have all this renewable and energy that we need to use. We're never going to get away, I don't think, completely from fossil fuels, but we can enact strict regulations to protect our friends in Cancer Alley and elsewhere. Renewables create jobs. Our job market is actually declining now, and we could be the world's leader in solar, wind. We could be making all the turbines, all the solar panels. We could be innovating, putting minds to work, creating a healthier, safer society. And instead, the current box of rocks, who's destroying the White House and the Kennedy Memorial Center, renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War, this box of rocks is just full of hate and impulse and id. There's no reason to go against renewables. Okay, that's the news for today. I'll fill you in later on some more. Just want to keep you abreast of all the many things happening so we don't lose focus. You can get my new book, Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins, at Amazon.com, or use the link in this post. You can subscribe to my YouTube podcast at David Steinman _author.